Hello dear friends, Moni speaking. Today I'm reading you some excerpts from the chapter The Coming of Gwenhwyfar, pages 168 to 169 from the book Arthur the War-King by Wilson Blackett. Wilson Blackett state in the introduction in the book that the story is as close to authentic and accurate as possible. They say it is written in a way that anyone can understand, and that they have interpreted the now known historical facts as accurately as possible in both time and place. So let's begin. Chapter The Coming of Gwenhwyfar. This is on page 150, and what I'm doing now, I'm reading an excerpt on page 168 because I find this very interesting, very interesting. So, take a drink, take a seat on the sofa or wherever, and here we go. That night the guests dined with the king and his queen, and she learned that they came from northern lands. They told her of places and people in the lands hundreds of miles north, and they described the mountains, the lakes and rivers. It struck Gwenhwyfar as curious that periodically there were frequently numbers of these visitors from the northern lands, who came in haste to see King Maurice and Arthur. The queen was still smarting at what she conceived of as a rejection of her presence and company. It had come as a shock to her to realize that young and beautiful she might be, but there were times when other matters took precedence in Arthur's mind. Her pride had been injured and dented, for unconsciously she had assumed that she was of greater importance to the king than anything else on earth. The private conferences with officials and important visitors were taking the shape and form of a rival, and Gwenhwyfar would not tolerate a rival of any sort for her place in the king's affections. Excuse me. During the meal, the young queen was deliberately polite and charming to the visitors, and to some younger men who had accompanied them. She made herself attractive and gay, quite encouraging the glances of young men and completely ignoring King Arthur. Whether anyone else noticed the pattern, he could see that the young queen was trying to arouse his jealousy over possession of her as his wife. A very dangerous course of action for anyone to undertake. One handsome young man was the particular attraction for the queen's gaiety, and the youth was clearly embarrassed and worried over what was happening as others became aware. The entertainments over, the guests began to excuse themselves, and King Arthur got up from his seat to retire. He took Gwenhwyfar's hand firmly in his and compelled her to go along with him. Without a word, he led her to her chambers and opened the door. The young queen hesitated. "I think I would prefer to be alone this night, my lord king," she spoke coolly, and stepped through the door and made as if to close it. In a split second, Arthur raised his foot and had kicked the door wide open, sending it slamming back on its hinges. Silently, he stepped inside the queen's chamber, and reaching out, he swung the door shut. His blue eyes blazed with fury, and the queen backed away from him, thoroughly frightened by this grim-faced transformation in her husband. She backed against the straw-filled, blanketed bed and fell backwards into a half-sitting position. "Don't you ever dare to behave again in the manner in which you behaved tonight," snarled Arthur, his breathing heavy as his temper rose. "And what manner is that, may I ask?" Gwenhwyfar replied smartly, totally failing to recognize the danger she was in. "You know very well what I speak of." Arthur's voice was thick with suppressed rage. "You sought to play the wanton woman at my own table, in my own hall, before my own eyes. Don't you ever dare to do anything like that again. Don't even think of it, unless you wish for more troubles than you ever imagined could even exist." "Do you threaten me?" Gwenhwyfar was wide-eyed with amazement. "Indeed I do. You will behave and conduct yourself as the queen, and you will show all due respect to me in public places and everywhere else." There was steel in King Arthur's voice. Gwenhwyfar shifted slightly on the bed. No one had ever raised their voice to her before in her life, and no one had ever threatened her. It was a new experience, and one she did not relish. "I am tired now. This is my chamber, and I wish to be alone." She turned away, still stubborn and offended with Arthur. "Lady, this is my kingdom and my hall, and I will go anywhere that I please in it whenever I choose." King Arthur's voice was hard and icy. "You will tell me that you understand, and that you will never again behave as you did this night." "I did no harm. You shut me out from your affairs and talk with whom you choose for hours. Why should I then be available when it pleases you?" Like most beautiful women, the queen totally overestimated the value of her person in the minds of men. King Arthur laughed contemptuously. "You did no harm. You have made an impression on the minds of visitors from other areas that I am a foolish king whose wife can play the loose woman before his very eyes. You have insulted me beyond belief." He walked up and down like a caged tiger. Have you no idea of the fear and dread which you put into that unfortunate youth with whom you played your games of looks and words? He should have enjoyed the evening. Instead he trembles and will do so for a long time, that I will cut off his head and nail it over the gates. If I am to save my own reputation, I may have to do just that. Gwenhwyfar watched her husband in growing apprehension, as if seeing him for the first time. She was still too proud to bend and admit to any fault, and she strove still to match the king. My father will not be pleased at these threats you utter to me. He will be angry that I am so treated by you. You no longer live with your father, retorted Arthur shortly. If Nithorn had been here this night, he would have beaten you backside black with this stick. You misjudge even your own father. As for his anger, you do not threaten a bull with a butterfly. It is your fault for shutting me out of the important matters of your life. She pouted and took refuge in the woman's weapon of tears, flinging herself back onto the bed and covering her head with her arms.